Elena collapsed outside her headquarters as 100 employees streamed past. Only a delivery driver stopped, dropping packages to help. His toddler watched from a stroller. Security stepped forward, but Elena raised her hand, because this single dad had proven what her executives never could. Before continuing the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers to be able to bring you stories like this every day. For you, it's just a click, but for me, it means a lot. Elena Hartwell stood 43 floors above the street, her palms pressed flat against the glass of her corner office window, watching the tide of employees stream out for their lunch break. 6 weeks had passed since the board meeting where Richard, her most trusted VP for 11 years, had been exposed for embezzling $12 million, and in those 6 weeks she had been planning this moment with the precision she once used to build her empire. Her hands trembled slightly against the cold glass, and she pulled them back, studying her reflection in the window. Somewhere in the last 3 years, since David died in that rainy intersection, she had lost the ability to read people. The instinct that had made her fortune, now a broken compass spinning uselessly in her chest. She turned from the window and walked to her private bathroom, peeling off the designer suit jacket, the silk blouse, the Italian heels that cost more than most people earned in a month. In the mirror, stripped down to civilian clothes, she looked like any other woman in her early 40s, tired and uncertain. And she remembered David's voice as clearly as if he was standing behind her. Character shows in crisis, not comfort, he used to say. Usually while they were interviewing a promising candidate or vetting a new partner. She had forgotten that wisdom, had let herself be fooled by polished resumes and confident presentations, and now she needed to remember how to see people as they truly were. The service elevator descended in silence, her security detail dismissed with a fabricated excuse about personal errands, and when the doors opened to the ground floor, she slipped out through the delivery entrance. The sidewalk outside the main entrance was already crowded with the lunch-hour rush, and she positioned herself carefully near the corner where the hidden cameras she had installed in 3 neighboring buildings would capture everything. At exactly 12:17, Elena let herself fall. She did not fake it gently or ease herself down with any grace. Her knee cracked against the concrete with real force, and genuine pain shot through her leg like lightning, but she kept her eyes closed and her body still. The first person walked past within seconds, then another, then a cluster of 3, their voices discussing a client presentation, fading as they moved away. Elena counted in her head, matching footsteps to faces she knew she would review later on the footage. 7 people, 15, 28. Some glanced down at her. A few pulled out their phones, but they kept walking, fingers already scrolling to the next distraction. 41, 57, 73. 8 minutes passed, like an eternity compressed into a single breath, and Elena felt something inside her crack, wider than her injured knee. 103 people walked past her broken body on the sidewalk, and not one of them stopped. Then she heard the screech of brakes, the thud of a truck door, the clatter of packages hitting pavement. Heavy footsteps ran toward her, and rough hands, gentle despite their calluses, touched her shoulder with a kind of care reserved for something precious and fragile. The voice was male, cracking with genuine panic. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Someone call 911. Elena opened her eyes slowly and saw him kneeling beside her. His uniform shirt was frayed at the collar and worn thin at the elbows, and his work boots were held together with strips of duct tape wrapped around the soles. His hands trembled as they hovered over her, afraid to move her but desperate to help, and his eyes held nothing but pure human concern, untainted by calculation or performance. Behind him, strapped into a stroller near the delivery truck, a little girl with dark pigtails clutched a worn stuffed rabbit and began to cry. The man turned his head slightly, his voice immediately softening. "It's okay, baby girl, Daddy's helping someone." The tenderness in those words made Elena's throat tighten, and she raised one hand slowly, stopping the security guards who were already rushing forward. "I'm fine," she whispered, but only loud enough for the man beside her to hear. "I'm fine." He sat back on his heels, confusion flooding his face, and then her head of security arrived, slightly breathless. "Miss Hartwell, shall we?" The man's face drained of all color. "Miss Hartwell," he repeated, his voice hollow with dawning realization. "As in Elena Hartwell, the billionaire CEO whose building he had just blocked with his illegally parked delivery truck." Marcus Chen scrambled to his feet, apologies tumbling from his mouth in a desperate rush. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I have to go. I'm 20 minutes behind schedule and—" Elena stood slowly, ignoring the sharp throb in her knee, and spoke a single word that cut through his panic. "Wait." She watched him freeze, watched his eyes dart to his daughter in the stroller, to the packages scattered across the sidewalk, to the growing line of traffic backed up behind his truck. His hands trembled as he bent to gather the packages, and she catalogued every detail with the clinical precision that had once been her greatest strength. The uniform worn thin at the elbows and knees, the work boots held together with duct tape, the way he kept glancing at his daughter, making sure she was safe, even as his entire world was clearly falling apart. But she also saw the dignity in his posture, the care with which he stacked the packages, the absence of any expectation that his good deed should exempt him from consequences. This man had stopped because someone needed help, not because he wanted recognition or reward, and that truth radiated from him like heat from summer pavement. "What's your name?" Elena asked. "Marcus," he said, still gathering packages, still apologizing. "Marcus Chen. I really need to go. I have 63 deliveries left, and my supervisor is going to." Elena pulled a business card from her pocket, the real one with her private line that fewer than 10 people in the world possessed. "Come to my office tomorrow," she said, holding it out. 9 a.m. Marcus stared at the card as if it might burst into flames in his hand. "Ma'am, I work tomorrow." "I can't." "You can," Elena interrupted. "Tell your supervisor you have an appointment with Elena Hartwell. Trust me. He'll understand." She watched him climb back into his truck, watched him drive away with the care of a man who could not afford even a minor accident. And when her assistant approached with a tablet showing camera angles and timestamps, Elena nodded but kept her eyes on the corner where Marcus Chen had knelt beside a stranger without hesitation. That evening, alone in her penthouse apartment where every surface gleamed with the sterile perfection of a museum, Elena watched the footage over and over. 103 people. 8 minutes. Only Marcus stopped. She sat on the leather sofa that David had picked out 6 years ago, back when they still believed they had unlimited time, and stared at the freeze frame of Marcus kneeling beside her. His face was contorted with worry for a complete stranger, his body angled to shield her from the crowd, his daughter watching him teach her, without words, that kindness mattered more than convenience. Elena had built a $37 billion company on her ability to identify talent, to see potential in people that others missed, to read character in the smallest gestures and unguarded moments. How had she missed the rot in her own boardroom? How had Richard stolen from her for 18 months while she looked right through the evidence? Her late husband's picture sat on the mantel, frozen at 43, forever younger than she was now, and she spoke to him in the empty room. "I used to know how to read people, David. I used to know." The city lights sparkled beyond her windows, millions of people living their separate lives, and somewhere out there Marcus Chen was probably terrified about what tomorrow's meeting would bring, having no idea that he had just passed a test that 99.03% of people had failed. Marcus Chen's apartment in the industrial district was clean but cramped, a one-bedroom with a living room barely large enough for a sagging couch and a cardboard box that held Lily's toys in carefully organized rows. He made spaghetti for dinner, the cheapest meal he knew that still counted as real food, and listened to Lily chatter about her day at Mrs. Rodriguez's daycare while he washed dishes by hand because the dishwasher had been broken for 4 months. Bath time turned into a small flood. When Lily insisted Mr. Hoppy needed to be washed too, and story time stretched longer than usual because Lily wanted 3 books instead of the usual 2, and finally his daughter fell asleep, clutching her rabbit with the fierce grip of a child who knew that worn stuffed animals were more reliable than people. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills spread out like evidence of his inadequacy. Rent, electricity, daycare, car insurance, medical bills from Lily's ear infection last month that had required 2 doctor visits and antibiotics he charged to a credit card that was already dangerously close to maxed out. His 2 jobs, delivery driver 5 days a week and weekend warehouse work, barely covered the essentials, and there was nothing left over for emergencies or broken dishwashers or the new winter coat Lily desperately needed. Rachel had left 2 years ago, walked out when Lily was 2 years old, saying she didn't sign up for this life, didn't sign up for a husband who worked 80 hours a week and still couldn't afford anything beyond basic survival. She sent nothing. No child support, no birthday cards, no acknowledgement that she had left a piece of herself behind in the form of a little girl who sometimes asked why mommy didn't love her anymore. Marcus pulled Elena Hartwell's business card from his pocket, the expensive cardstock feeling foreign against his calloused fingers. He had Googled her while waiting at a stoplight, his phone balanced on his knee, and the results had made his stomach drop. Billionaire, CEO of Hartwell Industries, $37 billion in annual revenue, government contracts and software development, and things he could not begin to understand. He had no idea why she wanted to see him. Maybe to thank him formally. Maybe to yell at him for blocking her building entrance and disrupting her employees' lunch hour. Maybe to sue him for something he had not even considered yet. He should ignore the card. He could not afford to miss a day of work. But something in her eyes, when she had looked at him, when she had whispered, "I'm fine," with a vulnerability that seemed to crack through her powerful facade, had felt like recognition. Not pity, not condescension. Recognition, as if she saw something in him that he did not know he possessed. "What would you do, Lily Bear?" he whispered to his sleeping daughter, and the answer came as clearly as if she had spoken it aloud. She would tell him to go, because helping people was always right, because Daddy had taught her that people mattered more than schedules or rules or fear. Marcus set his alarm for 6 a.m. Hartwell Tower rose into the sky like a monument to ambition, all glass and steel and intimidation, and Marcus arrived at 8:45 wearing his only dress shirt, the white one he had purchased 3 years ago for the custody hearing, where a judge had granted him full parental rights after Rachel failed to show up. The lobby was marble and chrome, and every surface reflected his inadequacy back at him. He clutched Lily's hand, guilt and necessity warring in his chest. Because he could not afford daycare on a non-work day, and he could not leave his 4-year-old daughter with neighbors he barely knew. A woman in designer heels and a suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent appeared silently beside them. Her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Chen, please follow me." The private elevator had glass walls, and Lily pressed her face against the window, watching the city shrink below them with the pure wonder of a child for whom every experience was still magical. "We're flying, Daddy," she breathed, and Marcus saw the assistant's expression flicker slightly, something almost human passing across her carefully maintained facade. Elena's office was larger than his entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a painting, and art on the walls that probably cost more than he would earn in his entire lifetime. Elena stood when they entered, and Marcus noticed she was limping slightly, favoring her left leg. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice warm but professional. "Thank you for coming." She looked down at Lily, and something in her face softened. "And who is this?" "My daughter, Lily," Marcus stammered, the apologies already forming. I'm sorry. "I should have." Elena crouched to Lily's level with the careful movement of someone in pain, and smiled. "Hello, Lily. I'm Elena. That's a beautiful rabbit." "His name is Mr. Hoppy," Lily said with the serious confidence of childhood. "He's very old." Elena offered them coffee, real coffee from a machine that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. And he accepted gratefully because he had not been able to afford his usual morning cup. She did not sit behind her massive desk in the power position he expected. Instead, she sat in the chair next to his, their eyes level, equals despite the vast canyon of wealth and status between them. Do you know why I asked you here? Elena said. And Marcus shook his head, his mind spinning through possibilities, none of them making sense. Yesterday I collapsed outside this building, Elena continued, her voice steady but her eyes searching his face. 103 people walked past me in 8 minutes. You were the only one who stopped. Why? Marcus blinked, confusion flooding through him. Why? He repeated. Because you needed help. You had deliveries, Elena said, leaning forward slightly. You were working. You could have lost your job. Ma'am, Marcus said slowly, I don't understand what you're asking. Elena's eyes held his, and he saw something raw beneath her polished exterior, something broken and searching. I need to understand what makes someone stop, she said quietly. What makes someone choose humanity over convenience? The question hung in the air between them like something fragile and vital. And Marcus realized with sudden clarity that this was not about gratitude or lawsuits or any of the scenarios he had imagined. This was about something far more fundamental, far more important, and he had no idea how to answer, because stopping had not felt like a choice at all, but simply the only possible response when another human being needed help. Elena leaned back in her chair, and for a long moment she simply studied Marcus Chen with the intensity that had once made her fortune, the ability to read a person's character in the smallest gestures and unguarded moments. Richard was my VP for 11 years, she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. I trusted him with everything. Every major decision, every financial strategy, every expansion plan. And for 18 months he stole from this company, from me, and I missed every single sign. Marcus listened in silence while Lily colored contentedly on paper Elena's assistant had provided, her small hands moving the crayons with careful precision. I built this company on reading people, Elena continued, and something in her voice cracked just slightly. On seeing potential where others saw risk. On identifying character beneath the surface credentials, and I failed. I failed so completely that I started questioning whether I had ever really known how to see people at all, or if I had just been lucky all those years. Marcus shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with the raw vulnerability this powerful woman was showing him, but Elena pressed forward. When I saw you yesterday, really saw you, I saw something I haven't seen in 3 years of boardroom meetings and executive interviews and corporate presentations. Instinct, unthinking kindness, the kind of character that doesn't perform for an audience or calculate the cost-benefit ratio of compassion. Marcus cleared his throat softly. I just did what anyone would do, he said. But Elena shook her head with a sad smile. But they didn't, she replied. 103 people didn't. She reached across the table and slid a folder toward him, the leather portfolio embossed with the Hartwell Industries logo. I'm rebuilding my leadership team, she said, watching his face carefully. I need people I can trust. People with integrity that runs deeper than ambition. I want to offer you a position. Marcus opened the folder with trembling hands, and the words on the first page swam in his vision. Director of Operations. His mouth went dry. Ma'am, I deliver packages, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't finish college. I don't have any experience in corporate management or business strategy or anything remotely related to running a division of a multi-billion-dollar company. This is a mistake. It's not, Elena said simply, and slid another page toward him. The salary line made Marcus's vision actually blur at the edges. $230,000 annual. Benefits package including full medical, dental, and vision. Education reimbursement up to $50,000 per year. Childcare assistance. Relocation. Stipend. It was more money than he had made in the last 6 years combined. More money than he had ever imagined earning in his entire lifetime. I can't, he said, his voice strangled. I'm not qualified for this. Elena's expression remained calm and unchanging. You made a split-second decision to help a stranger while your daughter watched, she said. You taught her that kindness matters more than consequences. that humanity matters more than convenience. You showed her character in action without even thinking about it. That's the qualification I need. That's what I've been unable to find in any resume or interview or background check. Marcus stood abruptly, backing toward the door, and Lily looked up from her coloring with concerned eyes. I appreciate this more than I can say, Marcus managed. But I can't accept. I don't belong here. I would fail. I would let you down and waste your time and prove that your instinct about me was wrong. This was the first major conflict. The moment Elena had not anticipated, because she had expected gratitude or overwhelmed acceptance, or perhaps suspicion, but not this genuine humble resistance born from self-knowledge rather than false modesty. "Why are you saying no?" Elena asked, standing as well. "Because I know my limits," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "Because I have a daughter who depends on me for everything, and I can't risk the stable life we have, however modest, for something I'll inevitably mess up." Elena studied him for another long moment, and then she made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. 3 months, she said. Trial period. You shadow me, learn the business, attend meetings, study our operations. If after 3 months you still think you can't do it, you walk away. No penalties, no consequences. I'll write you a recommendation letter for anything you want. Your delivery job will still be there. Marcus hesitated, the offer hanging between them like something precious and fragile. "And if I fail before 3 months?" he asked quietly. "Then you've lost nothing but time," Elena replied. The truth she did not speak aloud was that she was betting everything on her instinct about this man, that if she was wrong about him, then she had truly lost her ability to read people entirely and should probably step down as CEO before she made any more catastrophic judgments. "I need one thing from you," Marcus said after a long silence. "Lily comes with me. I can't afford daycare on non-work days, and I won't leave her with strangers while I figure this out." Elena looked at the little girl who had fallen asleep on the leather sofa. Mr. Hoppy tucked securely under her chin and felt something in her chest loosen slightly. "Deal," she said. "We have a corporate daycare on the 35th floor. Lily gets a spot, fully subsidized." Marcus's eyes filled with tears he absolutely refused to let fall, and his voice came out rough and raw. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Elena met his gaze directly. "Because someone has to prove I'm not completely broken at reading people," she said simply. "Because I need to know if I can still trust my instincts. And because you deserve a chance to become more than circumstances have allowed you to be." The following week, Marcus started, and his first day was a study in contrasts that would have been comedic if it had not been so painfully real. He arrived in his delivery uniform because it was literally all he owned that was even remotely professional. And Elena's assistant took one look at him and gently guided him to the company tailor for a proper fitting. Marcus was mortified by the expense, by the measuring and the fabric samples and the selection of shirts and ties and shoes, but the assistant simply smiled and assured him it was standard for all executives. The department heads he met throughout the day looked at him with varying degrees of confusion and skepticism, as if Elena had brought in a stray dog and announced it would be learning to do surgery. One executive in particular, Patricia Monroe, was coldly professional in a way that made Marcus's stomach churn with anxiety. "Director of Operations," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "What are your qualifications, Mr. Chen?" "None," Marcus said honestly, because lying had never been in his nature. "But I'm going to learn." The learning curve was steeper than any mountain Marcus had ever imagined climbing. Financial reports filled with terminology he did not understand. Strategy meetings where everyone spoke in acronyms and assumed knowledge of industry standards he had never heard of. Late nights, working until midnight, studying operational procedures and market analysis, while Lily slept peacefully in the office daycare. Her small form curled around Mr. Hoppy. Elena watched from her desk, but she did not help, did not offer shortcuts or explanations, because this was his trial by fire, and he needed to prove he could survive the flames. 2 weeks into the trial period, Marcus was reviewing a supplier contract at 11 at night, his eyes burning with exhaustion, when he noticed something odd, a tiny inconsistency in the billing structure, a charge that appeared in some months, but not others, with no clear pattern. He brought it to Elena the next morning, hesitant and uncertain. "I might be wrong," he started, but Elena cut him off by reading the document carefully. He was not wrong. It was a $15,000 discrepancy, small enough to slip past cursory review but large enough to matter. Elena sent it to legal immediately. An investigation revealed the supplier had been systematically overcharging for 8 months. Elena did not praise Marcus publicly, did not make a show of his discovery. But that evening he found an email waiting in his inbox. "You're learning to see what others miss. Keep going." Those simple words carried him through the next 2 weeks of struggle and doubt. 4 weeks into the trial, Elena brought Marcus to his first board meeting, and the narrator would later recognize this as the moment when the true battle began. The boardroom was intimidation made physical. All dark wood and leather chairs, and 12 executives in suits that cost more than Marcus's truck, and Marcus sat at the massive table in his new but obviously off-the-rack blazer, feeling like an imposter at a costume party. Patricia Monroe led the attack disguised as professional inquiry. "Mr. Chen," she said with that same cold smile, "what's your analysis of the Q3 projections?" Marcus had been focused entirely on operations and contract review. He did not have an analysis of Q3 projections. "I don't have enough data yet," he said honestly. And Patricia's smile widened like a predator scenting blood. "Then perhaps you shouldn't be in this room," she said pleasantly. Elena cut in before Marcus could respond. "Marcus has identified 3 contract discrepancies that saved this company $47,000 in 1 month," she said, her voice level, but carrying an edge of steel. "How many have you identified, Patricia?" The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable, but Marcus saw clearly what was happening beneath the surface. The resentment, the alliances forming. Patricia was not alone in her skepticism. At least half the board thought he was Elena's pet project, proof that her judgment had been compromised by Richard's betrayal and her own isolation. After the meeting, Elena and Marcus walked slowly through the executive floor. And Marcus finally spoke. "They hate me," he said quietly. Elena shook her head. "They don't trust you," she corrected. "There's a difference. Earn their trust." "How?" Marcus asked, feeling the weight of impossibility pressing down on his shoulders. "Keep doing what you're doing," Elena replied. "See what they miss. Care about what they've stopped caring about." That afternoon, Marcus picked up Lily from the corporate daycare, and she showed him a picture she had made with construction paper and crayons. 3 stick figures stood holding hands under a yellow circle sun. "There's you and me and Miss Elena," Lily explained, and Marcus studied the careful way she had drawn each person. "Miss Elena is sad," Lily added matter-of-factly. "How do you know?" Marcus asked, crouching to her level. "Her eyes are the same as yours when you look at Mommy's picture," Lily said with the devastating perception that only children possess. Marcus stared at the drawing. At the powerful CEO rendered as a simple stick figure by a 4-year-old who had seen past wealth and status to the loneliness underneath, and he realized that Lily understood something the entire board had missed. Week 7 arrived with an unexpected invitation. Elena asked Marcus and Lily to dinner at her penthouse, framed ostensibly as a discussion of Q4 strategy. But Marcus suspected there was more beneath the professional veneer. The apartment was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful, every surface gleaming and perfect, and utterly devoid of the warm chaos that made a place feel like an actual home. Nothing was out of place. No dishes in the sink. No shoes kicked off by the door. No magazines on the coffee table or blankets draped over furniture. Lily noticed the piano immediately, a grand instrument sitting in the corner like a monument to something lost. "Do you play?" she asked Elena with innocent curiosity. Elena nodded slowly. She had not touched it in 3 years, not since David died. But something about Lily's open face made her want to try. While Lily explored the apartment with the careful respect of a well-behaved child, Elena and Marcus sat in the living room that felt more like a stage set than a place where people actually lived. And Elena began to talk. She told him about David, about meeting in business school and building the company together from nothing, about shared dreams and late nights, and the kind of partnership that made work feel like play. She told him about the car accident on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, another driver running a red light, the phone call that shattered her world into before and after. She told him about the 3 years since, where she had thrown herself into work with desperate intensity because grief was too heavy to carry any other way, because an empty apartment at night was unbearable without distraction. Marcus listened with the same attention he had given her in her office. And then quietly, he shared his own story. Rachel leaving when Lily was 2 years old, saying she deserved better than a life of poverty and struggle. The custody battle, where Rachel wanted parental rights but no actual parenting responsibilities. The 2 jobs and the exhaustion and the constant fear that he was failing his daughter by not being able to give her more than spaghetti dinners and duct-taped boots. But then she looks at me like I'm her hero, Marcus said softly. And I think maybe love is enough. Maybe character matters more than circumstances. Elena saw herself reflected in Marcus's story. Saw the same loneliness shaped by different losses. The same determination to keep going when giving up would have been easier. I tested those people because I needed to know if goodness still existed in the world, she said quietly. If I could still recognize genuine character when I saw it. Marcus met her eyes directly. Did you find your answer? He asked. I think so, Elena replied, and the truth of those words settled between them like something sacred. This was the emotional turning point, the moment when 2 broken people from impossibly different worlds recognized the same wound in each other and understood that wealth and poverty were just surface details covering the universal human need for connection and purpose, hope. Lily climbed onto the piano bench then, pressing one key experimentally, then another, her small face lighting up with delight at the sounds. Elena rose and sat beside her, and her hands found the keys with muscle memory she thought she had lost. She showed Lily a simple melody, just 5 notes repeating, and Lily giggled with pure joy. Marcus watched Elena's face transform, watched years of careful control and contained grief give way to something genuine and unguarded, and the narrator would recognize this as the moment Elena truly smiled for the first time in 3 years. A real smile that reached her eyes and made her look younger and lighter and fully alive. The melody filled the sterile apartment, simple notes played by an uncertain child and a grieving woman who was finally beginning to remember what it felt like to be human again. And in that moment, the future shifted from impossible to merely improbable. From fantasy to something that might actually be within reach if they were both brave enough to keep believing in each other. Week 10 arrived with the weight of revelation that would either save the company or prove that Marcus Chen had no business being in a position of such responsibility. He was reviewing operational budgets at 2 a.m, Lily asleep on the small couch in his office that had become her second bed, when he saw it. A pattern in financial transfers that made his blood run cold because he had seen this exact structure before in the files from Richard's embezzlement case. But this was bigger, more sophisticated, more carefully hidden across 16 months of operational budgets. $23 million moving through shell accounts and false vendor invoices with a kind of precision that only came from someone who understood the system intimately. Marcus spent 3 more hours checking his work, cross-referencing dates and amounts and transfer codes, praying he was wrong but knowing with growing certainty that he was not. At 5 a.m, he knocked on Elena's office door, his hands shaking slightly as he held the folder containing his findings. I need you to look at this, he said quietly. I hope I'm wrong. Elena took the folder and began reading. And Marcus watched her face go pale as she absorbed what he had discovered. The evidence pointed unmistakably to Patricia Monroe, Elena's most senior board member, the woman who had been undermining Marcus since his first day, the executive who sat in meetings with cold superiority and obvious contempt for the delivery driver who dared to think he belonged in her boardroom. Are you certain? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded. I've checked it 14 times. I'm certain. The silence that followed was profound and terrible because they both understood what this meant. Another betrayal. Another trusted colleague stealing from the company Elena had built with her late husband's partnership and her own relentless vision. Elena could go to authorities immediately, could pick up the phone and end Patricia's career with a single call, but Patricia had allies and connections and decades of corporate relationships that could turn this into a public nightmare if handled incorrectly. "We need absolute proof," Elena said finally. "Security footage, communication records, direct testimony." Marcus met her eyes and nodded. "I can get it. Give me 48 hours. Marcus knew this was dangerous in ways that went beyond professional risk. If Patricia realized he was investigating her, she could destroy evidence, could fabricate counter-accusations, could use her considerable influence to discredit him completely. But this was exactly what Elena had hired him for. The ability to see what others missed. The integrity to act on truth regardless of consequences. He worked through the next 2 nights with barely any sleep. Lily curled on the office couch with Mr. Hoppy, and Elena worked beside him, pulling files and cross-referencing dates and building an airtight case. They barely spoke during those long hours, but there was an understanding between them now, a partnership forged in shared purpose and mutual trust. At 4 a.m. of the second night, Marcus found it. An email from Patricia's personal account to a shell company account sent at 3:15 a.m. on a Tuesday 6 months ago, containing explicit instructions for the next transfer. Proof, undeniable and damning. "We have her," Marcus said, his voice rough with exhaustion and something like triumph. Elena stared at the email on the screen, her hands trembling slightly. "You did this," she said quietly. "You saved the company." "We did this," Marcus corrected. And the truth of those words settled between them like a covenant. Elena called an emergency board meeting for the following afternoon, and Patricia Monroe arrived with the confident stride of someone who believed this was just another opportunity to demonstrate Marcus's inadequacy. The full board assembled in the conference room, 12 executives minus the 2 who had resigned after Richard's scandal, and Elena began with calm formality. Company performance metrics, fourth quarter projections, operational efficiency improvements. Then she pivoted with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. "I want to discuss our approach to internal auditing and financial oversight," she said pleasantly. Marcus stood to present, and his hands gripped the laser pointer with white-knuckled intensity. But his voice when he spoke was steady and clear. He walked them through the findings methodically, displaying spreadsheets and transfer records and pattern analysis with the careful attention to detail he had learned in 10 weeks of brutal education. The numbers told a story of systematic theft. The patterns revealed sophisticated concealment. The evidence pointed to a single source. Patricia's face progressed through confusion to dawning realization to barely contained rage as the presentation continued. And Marcus watched her calculate whether to attack or retreat. She chose attack. "You're fabricating this," Patricia said, standing abruptly. "This is desperation. You bring in some delivery driver off the street and suddenly he's finding conspiracies everywhere. Elena, this is your grief making you paranoid. This is proof that you're not fit to lead this company anymore." The other board members shifted uncomfortably, but Elena's expression remained perfectly calm. "Security footage shows you accessing financial systems after hours on 17 occasions that match these transfer dates exactly," Elena said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Your personal bank accounts show deposits that match these amounts within 48 hours of each transfer. The FBI is waiting downstairs for your statement." The moment stretched thin and terrible as Patricia looked around the table for allies and found none. They had seen the evidence. They had heard the timeline. They understood what their colleague had done. Patricia's composure shattered like glass, and she lunged across the table toward Marcus with her hands reaching for his throat. "You nobody!" she screamed, her face contorted with fury and fear. "You nothing. You destroyed me. Security guards entered immediately and pulled her back, and Patricia continued screaming as they escorted her from the building, her voice echoing through the executive floor with accusations and threats and the desperate rage of someone whose carefully constructed facade had finally collapsed. Marcus stood frozen, adrenaline flooding his system, and Elena touched his shoulder with a gentle hand. "You did good," she said simply. The board meeting dissolved into chaos after Patricia's removal. 2 more board members resigned immediately, fearful of association with another scandal, while others pledged renewed loyalty to Elena's leadership. Legal teams were summoned. PR strategies were developed. The machinery of crisis management began its efficient work. Marcus sat alone in the empty boardroom afterward, his hands shaking with reaction, and Elena brought him coffee and sat beside him in silence, because there were no words adequate for what had just happened, no way to process the magnitude of what they had uncovered and exposed together. The 3-month trial period ended on a Saturday morning in early autumn, and Marcus had proven himself beyond any reasonable question. He had stopped a $23 million embezzlement scheme. He had reformed operational protocols throughout the company. He had earned grudging respect from the remaining executives, who recognized competence when they saw it, despite its unconventional packaging. Elena sat in her office with the permanent contract on her desk. Director of Operations with full benefits and partnership track and every privilege her company could offer, but she did not call Marcus immediately because doubt had crept into her thoughts during the quiet morning hours. Marcus had transformed her company in ways that went beyond catching criminals, had brought integrity and fresh perspective and genuine care to systems that had calcified into routine, but had she trapped him in a world where he did not truly belong. He was brilliant at this work, that was undeniable, but was it what he actually wanted, or simply what circumstances had forced him to accept? Was she holding him here out of gratitude for saving her company, or out of genuine belief that this was the right path for his life? She remembered David saying once, "True leadership is knowing when to hold on and when to let go," and the memory made her chest tighten with familiar grief. Elena called Marcus to her office, and he arrived with Lily holding his hand because it was Saturday, and they were both working voluntarily, which told Elena something important about his commitment. "3 months are up," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "I have the permanent contract ready," Elena continued, "but I need to ask you something first. Are you happy here?" The question hung in the air between them, more significant than any contract clause or salary negotiation, and Marcus was silent for a long moment. "You asked me why I stopped that day on the sidewalk," he said finally. "I didn't tell you the full truth." He picked up Lily and held her close, and the little girl settled against his chest with the absolute trust of a child who knows her father's embrace is the safest place in the world. "My wife left because I couldn't give her a bigger life," Marcus said quietly. "Fancy things, adventure, romance that came with financial security and social status. I was just a guy working 2 jobs and struggling to pay rent. When she walked out, I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I really was nobody, just another anonymous worker who would never matter to anyone beyond his immediate responsibilities. But Lily looked at me like I was everything," Marcus continued, his voice strengthening. "Like I was her hero and her whole world and the most important person who had ever existed. And I realized that character isn't about what you have or what you can buy or what status you can claim. It's about what you choose. Every single day, I choose to be someone she can be proud of. That's why I stopped on that sidewalk. Not because I'm special or extraordinary or different from anyone else. Because I want Lily to see a world where people help each other, where kindness matters more than convenience, where you don't walk past suffering just because stopping is inconvenient or risky or outside your job description." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but she did not look away. "These 3 months," Marcus said, meeting her gaze directly, "I learned something crucial about myself. I'm not an imposter. I'm not faking competence I don't possess. I belong here because you believed I could be more than I thought possible. And that belief gave me permission to become it. So yes, I'm happy here. But not because of the money. Though that has changed my life and Lily's life in ways I still can't fully process. Not because of the title or the office or the respect I've somehow earned from people who should know better. He shifted Lily in his arms, and she looked up at him with drowsy contentment. I'm happy because I get to work for someone who sees people the way they should be seen, Elena. Who looks past credentials and status and conventional qualifications to recognize character and potential. Who gave a delivery driver a chance to prove he could be more than circumstances had allowed him to be. 6 months after that conversation, Marcus Chen was officially Director of Operations at Hartwell Industries. And the transformation he had brought to the company went far beyond operational efficiency. He had promoted 3 warehouse workers into management positions after recognizing their untapped potential, had implemented transparent auditing systems that made another embezzlement virtually impossible, had created mentorship programs that connected senior executives with promising employees from unconventional backgrounds. The company was thriving in ways that transcended quarterly earnings. Building a culture where character mattered as much as competence and where people were valued for who they were rather than just what they could produce. Elena had changed too in ways both subtle and profound. She smiled now, genuine smiles that reached her eyes and transformed her face from coldly beautiful to warmly radiant. She left the office by 6 in the evening on Fridays to attend Lily's daycare performances, where the little girl sang off-key and beamed with pride. She taught Lily piano on weekend mornings. The 2 of them, sitting side by side on the bench, working through simple melodies that filled the penthouse with music and laughter. David's picture still sat on the mantel, his frozen smile a reminder of everything she had lost. But now there were new photos beside it. Marcus and Lily at the company picnic. The 3 of them at Lily's 5th birthday party. Elena and Lily making cookies in a kitchen that finally looked lived in rather than staged. She was healing, slowly and imperfectly, but healing nonetheless. Elena announced a new initiative at a press conference that made national news. The Hartwell Character Fund, she told the assembled reporters, would provide full scholarships for single parents pursuing education, along with childcare subsidies and job placement programs designed to identify talent in unconventional places. We look for character over credentials, she said, and Marcus stood beside her at the podium. No longer the uncomfortable outsider, but her partner in every way that mattered professionally. Because the most valuable employees aren't always the ones with perfect resumes and prestigious degrees. Sometimes they're the ones who stop to help a stranger on a busy sidewalk. Evening settled over the city as Marcus and Lily arrived at Elena's penthouse for their weekly dinner. A tradition that had formed organically over the past months. Lily went immediately to the piano and began playing the melody Elena had taught her, more confident now after months of practice, and the simple notes filled the apartment with warmth. Marcus and Elena sat on the balcony watching the city lights spread below them like stars fallen to earth. And Marcus asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it?" "The test. Finding me." Elena shook her head. "I regret that 103 people walked past me that day," she said. "I regret what that says about the world we've built and the values we've lost. But I don't regret that you stopped. I don't regret taking a chance on someone who proved that my instincts, damaged as I thought they were, could still recognize genuine character when I saw it." "I have a confession," Elena said after a moment. "That collapse on the sidewalk wasn't entirely staged. I was so exhausted from grief and paranoia and isolation that part of me almost hoped it would be real, that someone would care enough to notice I was breaking." Marcus looked at her with understanding. "And did they?" he asked. "You did," Elena replied. "When you knelt beside me, I saw it in your eyes. You didn't see the CEO or the test or the powerful woman everyone else sees. You saw a person who needed help, and you responded with pure instinct to offer that help." "I won't let you collapse again," Marcus said quietly, and it was both promise and prayer. "I know," Elena replied, and the certainty in her voice made the words true. They sat in comfortable silence while Lily's laughter drifted out from inside, her small voice calling for them to come watch her play a new song. 2 people from impossibly different worlds, brought together by a moment of crisis and a choice to stop, to kneel, to care. Elena had not just found an employee that day on the sidewalk. She had found family, purpose, and hope she thought she had lost forever. The city spread below them, millions of people living millions of separate stories. But tonight, in this moment, these three people had everything they needed: each other. In a world that teaches us to walk past suffering, to protect ourselves first, to measure worth in dollars and status and conventional markers of success, sometimes all it takes is one person to stop, one person to kneel beside a stranger on a crowded sidewalk while their daughter watches and learns what kindness looks like in action, one person to choose humanity over convenience, compassion over calculation, character over credential. Elena Hartwell had tested 100 men that day, setting up her elaborate experiment to determine if goodness still existed in a world that seemed to have forgotten its value. 99 of them failed. 99 of them walked past without stopping, too busy or too cautious, or too focused on their own concerns to notice another human being in need. But one man passed. One man dropped his packages and ignored his supervisor's wrath and taught his daughter through his actions that people matter more than schedules. And that one man changed everything. He saved a company from another devastating betrayal. He brought integrity and fresh perspective to systems that desperately needed both. He gave a grieving widow reason to smile again, and a lonely child someone else to love her. He proved that character, real and deep and unshakable, could still be recognized and valued and rewarded. Most importantly, he reminded everyone who heard their story that the choice to stop, to help, to care is never just about that single moment. It ripples outward in ways we cannot predict or measure, touching lives and changing futures, and creating possibilities that would never have existed if we had simply walked past. Elena and Marcus and Lily stood together on the balcony as the city lights glittered below them. Three souls bound by circumstance and choice, and the profound human need to be seen and valued for who we truly are. And their story became a testament to the transformative power of one simple decision: to stop when everyone else keeps walking, to see when everyone else looks away, to care when everyone else protects themselves first. In the end, that choice made all the difference.